Good evening, and thanks for joining us on another episode here, the official second episode of Fanatic Smack. I am your host, Carrington Gupte, and we got a special guest on today, all the way from Macau, if I'm saying it right, is where he's at right now. My best friend from high school, former teammate. We played basketball together, pickup basketball, and in high school. And now he's out teaching, got his doctorate, has written a couple books, which we're going to dive into. We got one that's coming out that you could pre-order, and really just learn about what's been going on. It's been a long freaking time since I've actually seen him. It's literally, I want to say it's been 10, 11 years since it was his wedding, actually. But let's go ahead and bring him on up. Dr. Tyler McNabb, welcome to the show.
Hey, man.
Good to see you, my
So
friend. Good to have you on.
so good to see you. And actually, I think it's been like 12 and a half years. So it's been too long, too long.
2009 you got married, or?
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. That's right, because I had just graduated high school and it was that summer. It was
Yeah.
July because I graduated 2009.
Yep.
So tell everybody, I said, did I pronounce it right?
Macau?
It's
Yes.
it's a region of China, or tell us a little bit.
Yes. Yeah. So I live in Macau, though currently, like right this second, I'm in Hong Kong.
Oh,
But Hong Kong's right next to Macau. So they're if you were in America, it would be like two big cities that are next to each other, perhaps something like Fort Worth and Dallas or something like that. But yeah, so Macau, and been there since I lived there in 2019 and most of 2020, and then because of COVID restrictions, my family and I got separated, so we actually had to live 9 months apart from each other,
oh,
and it was
horrible.
horrible. So just for the viewers to know, I have well, then I had 4 kids. Now I have 5 kids, and so being away from them, man, it was horrible. It was sad. But my boss was super kind, and he was like, you know what, go home, go be with your family and teach online. And so I'm really thankful to the university for letting me do that. And so I went back to America for almost a year, uh, and then brought my family to Hong Kong, and hopefully next week we'll actually be back in Macau. So
Wow. Yeah, that's crazy. So was that like mandated because of like the just with everything with the virus, whatever state or location they were in, they couldn't travel? Or how did that work?
no, it was foreigners couldn't get back into Macau. Um,
Oh, okay.
until very recently, they were like, all right, if you go to Hong Kong for 21 days, then you can come back to Macau. So but in order to get to Hong Kong, we had to go somewhere that wasn't America, because I was like on a don't come in list for Hong Kong because of COVID being so bad in America compared to other places. Um, and so we ended up going to Korea for we were
Wow.
there for 5 weeks, and then we got to Hong Kong, and then now we've been here almost 3 weeks, and hopefully, Lord willing, we'll be in Macau next week. So
Okay, so you have a house there, you rent,
apartment.
or you okay. Okay. So how was Korea? I actually landed in Korea as a layover for a couple
Hmm.
hours, maybe 6 to 8 hours in like 2005, 2004. We were going to India and we stopped in
Hmm.
Seoul for a while and ate some food at the restaurants. But how was that? You said 5 months you were there.
5 weeks. 5 weeks.
Oh,
Yeah.
5 weeks.
Um, yeah. No, it was cool. We like did like a spiritual pilgrimage in and there, and we just kind of hung out every day and got ice cream in McDonald's, and ate some Korean food, and just our ability as a family to eat um, not food that's not named McDonald's is limited, because my children are 3, 5, 7, and 9. My oldest ones, newborn, obviously doesn't eat that sort of thing. But yeah, so they're like, try new food. not when you have McDonald's. Come on. So, we had plenty of McDonald's and ice cream, and on occasion some Korean food.
So, from what I know, at least from the last couple years, you've obviously traveled a lot. So, how has that been with the kids? I take it they're pretty much like that's their lifestyle. They're born into it. So is it exciting to them going to new countries, or is this just they're accustomed to it at this point?
Yeah. So, I did my PhD at the University of Glasgow, and so I lived in Scotland for 3 years. And my oldest son was born there, and my daughter obviously was already there. And we would travel to like Italy or Switzerland, and just living, going back and forth between England and Ireland and Scotland. And so they were kind of like born into it, like you said. And then we spent a few years in Houston, where I taught at a university there. And I think that they got like accustomed to the American lifestyle. So like traveling to Macau was pretty cool for them. They were like originally like, oh wow, this is cool. Like, living in China. But I think now after this trip, they're like going to a new new country. So what? Who cares? I'd rather just be at home playing PlayStation 5.
And if I remember, I was looking at reading your website and everything. It was Houston Baptist you were at teaching there?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And for you guys that don't know, that's where you're originally from, right? Where were you born again? Was it Houston or just like a suburb of Texas?
So I moved to Houston when I was 2. So I was actually born in a military base or near military
Virginia,
base
North
in
Carolina.
Virginia. That's right. But yeah, so I grew up in Houston. The first place we moved to Houston is actually like 5 minutes away from the university that I taught at. And so that was a bit funny. But yeah, I mostly grew up in suburbs around Houston. But it was cool to be back. It was cool to show my wife. She's from Dallas. And it was cool to show the kids like this is where daddy's from, and it was really cool being there during the Rockets, the good years of the Rockets where
That's what I was gonna say. Yeah, you probably
Harden,
James Harden a lot.
yeah. I got to see a couple Harden games, Harden and Chris Paul, and that near finals that they had 2017 or so, where they were just a hamstring away from a title. Yeah, so it was pretty neat to be in Houston. And then we were also there for the Astros winning the World Series. And so it was pretty cool.
Good time to be there. It's crazy because I do remember, and I don't know if you know anything about this or remember anything about this, but maybe a year or two ago, there was some like issue with the owner of the Rockets and China, and like between
yes.
China pulling their merchandise. Were you in China as this was happening, or you were in Houston?
I was in China. No, I was in China when this was happening. Yeah.
Do you know anything about that? What was the deal with that? It had to be political. It was something political over not supporting.
Yeah. So the owner of the Rockets, or sorry, not the owner, the GM of the Rockets, who's now moved on to Philly.
Morey, that's right, Daryl Morey.
Yeah, Morey. Yeah. He made comments about Hong Kong, and they were seen as quite controversial in China, and so it was interesting because when I first got to China, I saw Rockets gear a lot, and so like I felt like I was at home because I saw Rockets gear, and I was like, okay, this is cool. This is home.
Well, because Yao Ming was from there, so that's why I didn't get it. I was like, did he forget like China's favorite team is the Houston Rockets?
Well, it was like overnight people stopped wearing Rockets gear, and it stopped being sold in stores, and it went from like Rockets being one of the primary teams to like the Lakers being the primary team. So it was quite interesting to kind of see that happen. But yeah, I try not to get into Chinese politics or anything. I just keep my head down and teach philosophy, and just kind of try to publish stuff and teach people and visit beautiful sites.
So. Absolutely, yeah. I know. I saw the latest book. I'm gonna pull it up here real quick. I got it on Amazon. It says February 22. It's gonna be available. So it's this top one, right?
Oh, is it now February 22? Oh, February 10th. Okay, good. I was like, no, did they push it back 12 more days? No,
Oh
yeah,
no,
February 10th.
22, the year 2022.
Ah, yes.
Um, So yeah, obviously, tell us a little bit about your degree in teaching and what you're teaching now,
Sure.
and kind of explain the book a little.
Yeah. So, um, I ended up doing a PhD in philosophy, though my focus is in something called religious epistemology. Right. So,
Okay.
epistemology, just for those who don't know what epistemology is, who might be watching, um, it's the study of knowledge, but really more specifically, it's kind of just the study of um, if beliefs are considered justified or rational or warranted, or if we can know, certain propositions, So it's this kind of this field of inquiry that investigates all these questions. And religious epistemology is just kind of like applying uh, these questions to religious belief. So, can we know that God exists? Can we know that some specific religious tradition is true? Are we justified in believing, in a specific religious tradition? So it's applying epistemology to these religious questions. And so, yeah, I did my PhD under a really great philosopher named Victoria Harrison. And she actually moved from Glasgow to Macau. So that's actually how I ended up coming to Macau from HBU.
Like a referral system,
Yeah.
kind of.
She was like, "Hey, there's this opening here for a couple year position. Why don't you, come here? It's no teaching at all. You just research for a couple of years." And so I went and ended up getting an offer from another university in the area that's permanent position. And so I was like, okay. uh, yeah, so there's this philosopher named Alvin Plantinga, and uh, Alvin Plantinga argues that it's possible, for all we know, that we have a cognitive faculty. Um, so we have various cognitive faculties, right? We have faculties, processes, right, that are aimed at producing beliefs and say that, I don't know, there's a computer in front of me right now that I'm talking to my friend Carrington. Yeah, you got another faculty or two that are responsible for producing um, memories. So namely that me and Carrington used to hang out every single day and
Yeah.
make music and play basketball and just had the time of our lives. And I've got we got other faculties aimed at producing belief in other minds, right? Uh, Reasoning in particular ways, right? We have these cognitive faculties. Well, he says it's possible, for all we know, that we have a faculty or faculties that are aimed at producing belief about God and His activities. And so, if our cognitive faculties, right? How do I know that Carrington exists and he's not like this Westworld robot that tricked me my whole entire life thinking that he was a human being, right? Like, how do I know that Carrington's another person? How do I know I'm not a brain in the matrix, right? And it's like, well, if my faculties are functioning properly and they're aimed at producing truth, well, then I can know that I'm not in the matrix or that Carrington's a real person. And so the same way with God, like if I'm designed to produce, if God does exist, right? And most people can entertain that conditional if God exists, and He's designed our cognitive faculties to produce belief that He exists or that He's created something. So take for example, picking up like a delicate flower. Right? I've actually had this experience multiple times where I pick up a flower and I look at all of its intricacies and its beauty, and all of a sudden I just find myself believing that God created it. Or you're at an ocean and you see the waters going and hitting the rocks and the wind, right? And you just all of a sudden look in the sky and just find yourself believing, right, that God's responsible for all this, or that God's really powerful, right? And so these are immediate beliefs that aren't inferred. It's not like I'm giving philosophical arguments for these things, like, oh, there's a creation, therefore a creator, or something like that. It's just kind of beliefs that we just find ourselves with. In a similar way, whenever I met Carrington that fateful day, and was it history? I don't know what class we met in, but
I believe it was U.S. history class.
yeah,
And it was at Heritage Christian.
yeah,
And
yeah.
yeah.
And then all of a sudden I get like a MySpace request, and I'm like, oh, who's this guy? He likes basketball a lot. Okay, I'm gonna be friends with him. And the rest is history. So whenever I first met Carrington, I just found myself believing that there's a person in front of me. It wasn't like through arguments or anything. It was just immediate, right? And so if God exists and He's designed the world in such a way that, when we look around in the environment sort of triggers belief about God and about what He's done, about who He is. Then if our faculties are functioning properly and aimed at truth, then we could know that God created something, that God exists, et cetera, et cetera. If our faculties are aimed at truth and functioning properly, and so in an immediate way. And so I sort of I defended this view, and my sort of most up-to-date technical defense of this can be found in a Cambridge University Press volume. It's a small volume called Religious Epistemology, right? A title so creative.
Just the name of it. That's what when I was texting you the other day, I was like, just the name of it. Because I had to look up what epistemology meant. Like people don't use it typically. It's not a everyday thing. But it really did intrigue me a lot. And then the title of your newest book, Connecting Metaphysical and Ethical Systems, that was like, that intrigued me even deeper. So what is that book so much about? I mean, obviously you can't say everything without it being out yet, but explain what you're attempting to do with this book.
Yeah. So the Buddhist tradition, right? It affirms two theses, at least, that entail one other thesis. The first one is interdependence. And the idea is that everything is dependent on each other. Everything's connected together. Right? Conceptually, historically, things depend. Everything depends on something else, right? And there's another thesis called the impermanence thesis, and roughly it states that there is nothing permanent. Everything constantly changes from one moment to the next. So identity, as we normally believe, right, as I do believe even currently, the Carrington that I hung out with 12 years ago is the same Carrington today, right? That your identity has stayed intact, right? It's not like you can go and rob a bank and then all of a sudden be like, that wasn't me, that was a different time slice that's not related to who I am now, right? But in Buddhism, the idea is like if there's any change at all, you're no longer the same being. And so whenever you endorse impermanence and interdependence, these theses, you come up with this idea that things are ultimately empty of having like an intrinsic nature. And so if you're a Buddhist, then right, normally you would think, well, hey, God is a thing, and that means He's dependent on other things, but God can't be dependent on other things, and He changes from one moment to the next. Like it's just like a different God every second. And so because His identity doesn't stay intact, and so clearly God is supposed to have permanence and immutability, never changing, and intrinsic identity and so forth. And so, well, hey, Buddhism then is incompatible with what we call classical theism. And classical theism, right? There's kind of a difference in the academic literature, right? You got like three levels of conceptions of God. At the first level, you have like people conceive of God kind of like Hercules or Zeus, right? It's like super duper anthropomorphic. God has a body. He's like dwelling in some place like, hey, what's up, guys? You know, high fiving, you know, God the Father or something like that.
Like
You know, the main,
I guess a good example would be like the Thor movies, how like
yeah,
his dad is like this almighty being that can cast him out to Earth whenever he wants to be, and all this stuff.
right, exactly. So like that's like a kind of like a popular on the street conception of God. It's also like how Mormons construe Elohim or God. So Mormons think that, you know, we were once humans, or sorry, that God was once a human and obtained godship and, you know, created us, and we too can obtain godship one day. So they have a very anthropomorphic view of God. Uh, and then you have like what I will call theistic personalist conception of God, which is still somewhat anthropomorphic. But you know, so God's still a thing. He's a person like you or I, but he's like greater. He's like you know, he has all those omni properties. He's all knowing, all powerful, right? All good. So he's like a superhuman mind, right? A superhuman immaterial mind. He's kind of like that, where he changes still, but he keeps his identity, of course. But he changes, right? He loses and gains properties. You know, he's in time, where he can communicate to us and, you know, have conversations in time. He might not change with respect to his goodness, right? I mean, he might still be always good, right? So in some weak sense, he's immutable, but in a strong sense, right, there is change in him, and we can cause God to have pain, or to be sorry, to be sad, you know. And you see a lot of this sort of like in the early Genesis accounts and the Torah, right? In the first 5 books of the Bible, you see God really portrayed kind of this as this anthropomorphic conception of God, though still without body, right? So this is kind of like the next level, right? And then you have what I call classical theism, which is the theism that's like endorsed by the philosophical giants of Christianity, Saint Augustine, Saint Thomas Aquinas, right? Maybe you've heard of these individuals. And how? So I'm Catholic. That changed, by the way, since the last time we talked. So it's understood in the Catholic tradition, you know, the way they conceive God's the way the Catholic tradition conceives God, where God isn't actually a thing, right? He can't be put into any category that's, you know, some sort of created category like a thing, right? Because the idea is, if you're trying to account, right, explain why things exist, you might have trouble doing that by appealing to a thing to explain why things exist, right? You need to appeal to something that's not a thing. And so, you know, God is not a thing. As David Bentley Hart, theologian, he refers to God as a no thing, a nothing, right? And what he means by this is not that there is no being or existence out there, right? It just means that God doesn't possess properties. You know, he's not a being like you and I. He exists in another sense, on a whole nother level, right?
Okay, so almost like, I guess, I mean, it's just like a presence, like a all existing presence that's there, that's not in any form, so to speak. So we could never compare in this sense to what he would possibly be, because it has nothing to do with like humans. We're only going to paint our own, like you said,
Right,
like where Mormons believe that he like transformed and gained godship status. So
right.
whereas this is just like it's an almighty presence that's just out there, possibly out there in the universe, right? That just kind of
So, yeah. So, no, there's some good comments. Yeah. So, the Catholic tradition, specifically with Saint Thomas Aquinas, would say that we know God like by analogy. We can know that, you know, what God is like by way of like analogy. So our language about God is not univocal. It doesn't match up exactly. So let's say I was hanging out with you and we're in Texas, the great country of Texas. And,
Yeah.
you know, I say, hey, can I have a Coke? Right. And what I mean by Coke is like, it could mean like any sort of soda, right? Because that's how a lot of people in Texas use the word Coke, right? Just a generic term, kind of like Google, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just means search in the internet engine,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Like, Google it. Literally, you could be on anything like Twitter,
Exactly.
Facebook search.
Google this for me. Yeah, so you come back and you bring me actually a Coca-Cola, right? And what I mean is a Dr. Pepper. Right? That's actually what I wanted. I mean, you're getting in the ballpark, right, of what I'm after. Dr. Pepper's like Coke, right? But it isn't, one for one Coca-Cola, right? And then of course, like I could have been like, hey, give me Coke, Carrington. And you could have been like, okay, but drugs are illegal and you're in China. It's not a good idea, right? And I'm like, no, not that kind of Coke, not that kind of Coke, right? And so we're totally like equivocating, right, on the concept of Coke. We're using the same word, but meaning totally two different things. And so what's in the middle between univocal language and equivocations is what's called analogical language. So we know God by sort of analogies, or we sort of these analogies get our minds in sort of the ballpark, but it can never actually grasp, in a complete univocal way, what God is. And so, when you here's you say like kind of like a all present spirit, or all present presence, right? Yeah, so there's this fun argument that St. Thomas Aquinas develops from Aristotle, right? And here's a sort of I'm going to develop it in a very contemporary way, right?
Okay.
So there's in philosophy, especially within Aristotelian metaphysics. So Aristotle, philosopher of old, right? Came after Socrates and Plato, and he makes it. He has like this demarcation between understanding reality, that there is potentiality, right? There's potential, and there's actuality, actual, right? And so, for example, things possess either actuality or potentiality, right? So this water bottle has the potential to be consumed, right? To be, I can drink it, right? That potential is not being acted upon right now. It's not being acted upon. However, if I, moved on its potential, because I'm in act right now, at least part of me is an act, I can move on the potential of this water bottle, and I just turn that potential to be consumed into act, right? Now it is actually being consumed, as we speak. I got my PlayStation 5 right here, right next to me, right? My precious, is I call it. This has the potential to be thrown down. I'm on like the 16th floor, right, of a Hong Kong building.
Oh gosh.
This has the potential to be thrown down, right? Thank God nothing is in act currently moving upon that potential to be thrown down. But hopefully you get the idea, you get the picture. And so the idea though is that potentiality can only turn into act when there's something already in act moving upon it. And so we see change. We see that there is change, and change just is potentiality turning into act. And so this could be change, not only like local change, not only like movement from an object to another object, but it can also be change with respect to quantity or quality of the object. I can get a chocolate bar and cut it up into mini chocolate bars. Right? I can get water and turn it into steam or ice. Right? When I mean change, I mean there's change in a very broad sense. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so if I had like let's say now that like I had a stick, and I was using the stick to push the rock. And I don't know, let's say there's a Coke can here. And I'm pushing the stick to push the rock, for the rock to crush the Coke can. Right? we could say, in a sense, that the stick is a derivative. It's a secondary cause of the rock moving, right? Ultimately, I'm responsible for moving the stick, right? But what you can keep asking these questions. Well, why does the rock crush the Coke can? Well, because it's being pushed by stick. Well, why is the stick moving? Well, because my arm is moving, right? And so we can kind of see my arm here as kind of like the instigator, the primary mover, right? In reality, of course, we can continue to ask further questions like, why does my arm move? What moves upon that, right? You keep asking that. But the idea is that there's like secondary causes or derivative causation and primary cause. And so you could postulate an infinite amount of objects between me and the Coke can. Nonetheless, the Coke can, right, in order to be crushed, it's going to have a mover in which the rock and the tree get their power to move. And so it's the same thing, like if you imagine like a big giant train, right? An infinite amount, you could say that there's like, why does this train car move? Well, because of this train car. Why does this train car move? Oh, because of this train car. Why does this train car move, right? And you could do that ad infinitum. You can do that for infinity. But you're not going to be able to make sense of any movement unless there's a train car that has like an engine, right? So yeah, you can. The idea here is that if we have change in reality, right? We see potentiality turning into act. We can continue to question, well, what turned that act from potentiality to act, and what turned that potentiality into act, right? Until we get to an uncaused cause, right? So God is the uncaused cause. He is the ground of existence, of being, of movement, of change itself. And so God is, given that he's uncaused, right? He's pure actuality, right? There's no potentiality in God. God doesn't change. So God is completely immutable. And that means we can't directly bring about changes in God, right? So he's what philosophers call impassible. And he's simple. He's not made up of like a whole bunch of properties. I mean, analogically, right, we could talk about God as having properties in a really loose sense, but in a strict sense, God is identical to existence itself. And so when you conceive of God like this, all right, where God's not a thing, those Buddhist theses won't actually apply to God, because they only apply to things, to object, to phenomena. But God totally transcends those categories. And so these theses then wouldn't apply to God if God is construed in this sort of way. And so actually Buddhist metaphysics, contrary to popular belief, are actually consistent with theism, with classical theism. And so the book explores all of this and much more, but it looks at ethical and soteriological salvation systems and so forth, and basically just tries to show that, hey, actually, these systems which seem contradictory are actually all consistent. And sort of at the end of the book, I give historical evidence to prefer Christianity and Catholicism, but then still saying we can combine, we can still see Christian religious experience or classical theistic religious experience as veridical, just like we can see Buddhist religious experience as veridical. It's just the Buddhists and their religious experience is mapping onto what we can call the far side of God. And the theist or the Christian's religious experience is mapping on to the near side of God. And so again, this is all to be understood analogically, of course, but yeah, that's kind of the idea of the book. So hopefully I'll pipe down now about the book, but that's roughly the book.
Okay, well, no, it was really interesting, just the title to me, because I'm not I'm not well educated in it, so it's intriguing. I wanted to learn about it, and then just the connecting between classical theism and Buddhism. I was like, this is interesting because, and then two, it kind of almost what you were saying. It kind of almost proves the whole point of classical theism because of the way humanity has always, regardless of where you go in the world or any tribe or continent, everybody has this story about the godlike presence, and they all interpret it their own way as to, yes, he was a human or a prophet or what have you. But that kind of, in a sense, because there's no, at least not to my knowledge that I know of, like, you can't really trace back any and every religion to, like, hey, we saw this person, or this is God. It's like, and why is it like that? Why is there so many different interpretations of a god or a godlike figure?
So in my small religious epistemology volume in chapter 3, I talk about cognitive science of religion. So what your viewers might be surprised to find out is that the paradigm view in science and cognitive science of religion is that religious belief is natural to us. You might hear some like pop atheists will say, "Oh, we're all born atheists, right? We have to learn religion, right?" That's not exactly the picture that does justice to what cognitive science teaches. So they're very explanations, but the general idea is that religious belief is evolutionary spandrel, a byproduct of certain advantageous evolutionary factors. And there are different theories about as to how this all works. The theory I'm most familiar with, and the theory that I engage with the most, is this idea that we have a hyper agency detection device. And so we sense agency even when it's not there, right? So an organism that senses agency like a lot is probably going to survive better than an organism that doesn't sense agency enough, right? So there's been these like sociological studies done in China, in America, and Scandinavia, England, Canada, where it asks people questions like, "Why are rocks pointy?" And so they'll respond by saying like, "So animals won't sit on them," or something like that. People see purpose, they see design naturally, they see teleology. And so one of the explanations is that we see teleology in part because we have this agency detection device. Now, generally, it is reliable, right? I mean, generally, when it detects agency, it's right. I'm detecting agency right now, right, when speaking to you. But there is this kind of understanding that sometimes it could go astray, right? You might think a ghost is there, or whatever. And so obviously the most of the field within cognitive science of religion, they're not like Orthodox Christians or anything, even close, like I am. But nonetheless, the general consensus is that religion is natural to us, right? And so the story I mentioned earlier from the philosopher Alvin Plantinga, where if we have cognitive faculties that sort of just naturally produce belief about God and his activities, and assuming that faculty is functioning rightly, then we can know that God exists, even if we were without argumentation. And so, it's quite interesting to see the science really mesh really well with this concept. And so, while our sense of divinity, if you want to call this faculty that produces belief about God, it might not be specifically like fine-tuned reliable, where it's producing all and only all accurate beliefs. Nonetheless, there's this kind of general reliability that if God exists, it's allowing us to be aware of divinity. It's allowing us to be aware that there is another realm. There is a supernatural aspect to reality, and so it is reliably getting us to truth in that sense. And so, I just exactly what you're saying. There's a reason why 90% of the world believes in God or something like God, right? And so there's this evolutionary explanation that I think is quite plausible.
So here's something that I I think about, because it's interesting, and I heard it yesterday. Someone was saying it, but it's just the common simple phrase. When like everybody says, "Oh, everything happens for a reason," you know.
Mm,
Does
exactly.
it make sense? And can an atheist even say that? Because then that
Mm,
indicates that there is some purpose or some presence for our lives and where we're supposed to go. But if we're truly not, we're just popped up or evolved
right,
and just wrecking balls through the galaxy. What are your
right.
thoughts on that? And why is that common across the world in almost every culture that's taught? You'll find it in a book or a text
Mm,
that things happen for a purpose.
yeah. So they can always just explain it away by saying, well, it's just solely because of certain evolutionary factors that we believe this. But really, it's not for a purpose, right? Purpose requires like intentions, and there is no mind intending that these things all collide and happen like this, right? Unless I guess you believe in like maybe there are these like extra dimensional alien creatures or something that are guiding all of our past or something, right? Or where we're just part of one big simulation, right? So I mean, I guess there are other ways to sort of conceive of this, but you're right. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense, or at least it doesn't fit very well in saying that everything happens for a purpose or everything happens for a reason. If there's just blind indifference and random mutation. I agree that is awkward. um, but yeah, that just goes to show again that we do naturally see design, we do naturally see purpose and reality, and so here's the big question, right? We trust our cognitive faculties in general, right? um, when when we go out, if I like left this hotel room and I went out and I saw people, generally I trust my faculties that there are buildings right here, that there are people over here, right? You trust them until you have damn good reason to think that they're not reliable, right? To think that they're someone slipped you LSD or something, right? You trust your faculties until they're proven guilty. And so the same thing is like if we take that approach about our perception or our memories, right? Why don't we take that same approach to our beliefs that are our faculties that are responsible for our religious beliefs, right? They all came about from the same shop, so to speak, whether by God or evolution or by both God and evolution. So it's like, we should trust our faculties unless we're given reason to like damn good reason to doubt them. And so in that case, if my faculties are naturally leading me to believe that God exists or that God raised Jesus from the dead, then I'm going to trust my faculties until I'm given damn good reason to think otherwise.
Okay. Now, is it possible or is there anybody that believes that creation and evolution, in a sense, can coexist?
Oh
Whereas
yes.
there's a create things were made to evolve, but they were created in
Mm,
the image to evolve to best, serve humanity and the planet until we figure out kind of
mm.
as humanity as a whole, like what our purpose is while we're here.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, first off, I do, and second off, as lots of Christians do as well, and the Catholic Church, especially the last, few popes, have spoken very fondly of contemporary science and evolution, and in fact, it was a Jesuit priest who was in part responsible for Big Bang cosmology, right? And so. It's the Catholic Church is really meshes well with science. Um, but yeah, I mean, the the idea that God exists, right, as this sort of classical right conception of God that we talked about, and He's designed us and our faculties, right? He brought us about through evolution, through random mutations. Um, Random mutations, by the way, in biology doesn't mean like it's not guided by God. It's not a philosophical statement. It just means that there's no physical mechanism inside the organism or outside the organism that's dictating the next mutation, right? And so that's completely consistent with God sort of guiding the mutations. And so, God brings us humans about, uh, at one particular time, right? God decides to put his image into a pair of human-like creatures, and then that sort of turns them fully human. And then you actually do see at a particular time like this crazy intervention and flourishing that sort of humanity gets at a particular time period. So maybe that's when God put his image in a person who we now call Adam or Eve. I think most of Genesis 1 through 11 is like primeval history. It's mythology and it's genre. That I think there are probably historical truths, right, through Genesis 1 through 11. But Genesis 1 through 11 is primarily speaking in mythology terms, and it's getting us to learn theological truths from this history. So like with Noah's Ark, for example, was there really a guy named Noah? Maybe. It definitely, I don't think was a worldwide flood, if there was a flood. But regardless, I don't think that's what like Genesis is primarily about, right? You see with Noah, God's like, all right, I'm going to destroy everyone. Here's the story that's being told. God's going to destroy everyone except for Noah and his family because they're righteous. So what happens? God destroys everyone with water. Noah and his family emerges. They get out of the boat. And what's the first thing they do? Right? They sin. Noah gets drunk and, his son sees him naked, whatever that means. It could be a euphemism for all I know. And so like, what's the first thing the righteous people do when all the unrighteous people die off? They become unrighteous.
Yeah.
And so the whole point is like, humans suck. And there's this question of like, well, why can't God just make everything, just take out all the wicked people in the world? And the answer is right there. It's like, because in our hearts, we suck too. And even what we perceive as righteous, like we would fall as well. And so, that's the point of the flood narrative. And God's adopting this text, even if there aren't historical contents, even if there isn't a historical backing of the text, he still adopts the text as his own, and he wants to tell this text to show us truth about him. Now, I do think that's different with the resurrection of Jesus. I do think there is historical evidence for the resurrection of Jesus. But the idea about Genesis 1 through 11, I do take that to be like mythology with historical kernels of truth in the background. And so I mean, God, puts his image into, creates the human person as we know them today. And, he utilizes their evolutionary upbringing, their evolutionary origins, this hyper agency detection device, and a theory of mind together to let them recognize that there is a spiritual reality. There is divinity in this world. And then we can all cooperate together and use philosophy and reason and tradition to help us get at exactly what is divinity, what is the supernatural, what is there. So we have this like general broad sense helping us figure out that there is something, and then we can use reason and science and group cooperation to figure out more precisely what is there. So that's the story I affirm.
Okay, it's funny because I was actually having a conversation similar to that the other day, where I was like, obviously there's certain groups of people and certain religions that take the Bible like very literal, word for word. Like, yes, there was, yes, this happened. Yes, this person was this, and this. Going back to the flood, I always thought it was very weird, even reading it and growing up in church and all this. I thought it was so weird that it happened so early on in the beginning of humanity. I'm like, why? So if it was the whole world, how many people were there? Did they multiply that fast? One, and then two, it's like it begins like that and it ends like that, because then there's all the in between, and then you have Revelations and the tribulation, and you have the people again left on earth and the people that escape. So that to me, so I think what I was saying was, I think that the Bible is a set of in a sense, moral beliefs or a compass, a humanity compass for us to, navigate, come together, with, like you said, science, love, do different things, religion, creation, all these different things that humans could do to come together to, find that actual purpose of what we're supposed to be doing. Um, and then that leads me into my next thing, which is curious to what you think of the whole space technology age we're in now. Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, all of these guys. We're probably not gonna, live in outer space.
Mm.
But like, for example, our kids could be
Yeah.
the older people that are like, ushering in the generation that does. So I'm curious to see your thoughts on that and how that ties into classical theism, just the
Mm.
Bible in general,
You,
space.
you know, I have like a paper on this, right? A co-authored paper on this.
No,
I don't know if you didn't know, but I've actually written on this
I'm gonna
topic.
read it for our next conversation. Definitely gotta
uh,
read it. Where can we find it? Where can we find it actually for
if
everybody to read?
if you just put in like there's a website, it's kind of like Facebook, but it's for academics. It's called Phil Papers. So if you just like Google Phil Papers, like philosophy papers, Phil Papers,
Oh, okay.
and put my name, Tyler McNabb, I'll have a page, and then you'll see my paper come up, in which I entitle I title it Houston. Do we have a problem? Extra terrestrials and Christian belief. But so I definitely want to get to that in just 1 second. I did want to just quickly respond to your last comment that you made about the historicity and so forth behind scripture and so forth. So I think that the Bible is basically a library, right? It's not like a book that is supposed to be read like 21st century books. Right? It's a library containing ancient books with an ancient literature. You got like apocalyptic literature, you've got wisdom literature, you've got what I take to be mythology that expresses certain historical truths behind it. You've got all these different things.
The Psalms, the parables, like, yeah.
And you have the Gospels, which I think are what most New Testament scholars think are what's called Greco-Roman biographies. So we need to interpret each book in accordance with its genre, right, and not treat each book the same. Just like if you were at a library, right? You wouldn't pick up some poetry and then pick up Harry Potter and be like, and then pick up a biography of George Washington and be like, this is all the same thing, right?
Right.
And
That's
so
interesting. Huh. Okay.
yes, so there's this when it comes to Greco-Roman biographies, they are intended to convey truth. Now, Greco-Roman biographies aren't made in the same way 20th, 21st century biographies are made, where we want like everything in it historically as is, completely accurate, right?
Right.
In their culture, it was okay to invent something that this individual would normally say, or to summarize their teaching, or to just like change chronologically events that occurred in order to better tell the story or to tell the story that they're trying to intend.
Okay.
So there's more literary looseness to Greco-Roman biographies. But anyway, when secular New Testament historians come together and they're like, well, what should we believe? Right? They're not obviously going to believe it was written by God. And so they use different criteria to, figure the historical Jesus out. And so one criterion is criterion of multiple attestation, right? So if someone says that P happened, right, some event happened, and then another source says P happened, well, that gives us some reason to think P happened, right? We got multiple sources for it. And so with the death of Christ, right, his existence, almost no scholar, right, questions whether Jesus existed and was crucified under Pontius Pilate. And so multiple sources, secular sources like historians like Tacitus, Josephus, also Paul's letters, and also gospel accounts, and the gospels are probably using other sources as well. So more primarily those sources that their gospels are using. Talk about this. The burial of Christ. It's believed that he was buried, in part because there's this criterion of embarrassment. They go something like, if something is embarrassing that the individual states, and they have nothing to gain by the embarrassing fact, right? Then that adds to that's some evidence that the embarrassing thing actually occurred. So if I were to tell you like, oh man, I was walking up the stairs the other day and I tripped and I was carrying multiple drinks and they just spilled all over the stairs. And I tripped up the stairs. I didn't even fall down the stairs. I fell up the stairs, right? That's embarrassing. So, if I have nothing to gain, then that adds to some evidence that I'm actually telling the truth, right? And so, the early Christians were at odds with the Sanhedrin Council, right? The Sanhedrin Council, if you recall, they were the ones who condemned Jesus and brought Jesus, right, to Pontius
they were the
Pilate.
High court, in a sense, Supreme Court of that time.
Exactly. And so, the early Christians probably don't have too much motivation to make the Sanhedrin look good. But nonetheless, they state that a member of the Sanhedrin, Joseph of Arimathea, actually did something really kind to Jesus and buried him in a tomb, which, buried him in a nice tomb that wasn't common in that day. You're more likely to be thrown into a body of with a hole with other people, right?
Mass grave.
Exactly. And then same thing with like that the tomb became empty. So it's not like a heavy consensus, but it still is. Majority of New Testament scholars believe that there really was an empty tomb, because who were the first to see the empty tomb, right? The women. Mm-hmm. And if we read first century historian Josephus, we see that, like, unfortunately, sadly, women's testimony was worth like nothing in the day. And so, like, think about it. If you're trying to start a cult, you're trying to start a religion, you're trying to start a movement in first century Israel, you're probably not going to say the women were the first to see the empty tomb. Even in Paul's letter to the Corinthians in 1 Corinthians 15, where he talks about the empty tomb and the disciples all seeing and Jesus appearing to 500 and so forth, he leaves out women. He doesn't mention them, right? And so most New Testament historians believe that the disciples really did believe that they had encountered the risen Jesus. That, again, is not to say that they did encounter the risen Jesus, but that most New Testament scholars believe that they believed it, right? Mm. And so, because you have multiple sources testifying to this, and also, it's one thing to die for something that is that you think is true, but is actually false, right? Think about like Islamic terrorism, right? Extreme Islamic terrorism. Not to characterize all Islam that way, but the extreme versions of it. I think that probably many of those people who die as quote unquote martyrs do sincerely believe that they are doing Allah's will. But it's another thing to die for something is false. Like, I'm going to start a movement and then I'm going to die for it, right? And then I know it's all false, but I'm going to do it anyway, right? Like when Watergate happened, right?
Exactly.
People like folded real quick, right, under pressure. But yet the Christians, they were really emboldened. The early Christians, the people who were eyewitnesses of Jesus and his ministry, they were emboldened. And we don't have any historical record of the disciples caving. In fact, if anything, the history points to they died preaching what they believed. So anyway, so when you have all these facts together, the most contemporary explanation is that, well, the disciples they had a hallucination, right? But when you look at the contemporary psychology literature, there's almost nothing on group hallucinations, and generally hallucinations happen only with one of the senses. And like 33% of them happen with like grieving spouses who have lost a loved one. So unless you have schizophrenia or are on LSD or something, probably the hallucination will only be one-dimensional, so to speak. So and then that, of course, that doesn't explain the empty tomb. So when you put all these things together, and let's say in the background, you already have reasons to believe that God exists, maybe from your own experience or from arguments for God's existence, like the one I gave earlier. Um, uh, you know, uh, it really seems that if God exists and he has a vested interest in history, that when you have these facts, well, the best explanation of these facts is that God raised Jesus from the dead, and he did so for those who, turn from their sins and trust in his son, right? And the normal way to do that is through baptism. Baptism, at least what the Catholic Church teaches, is that's how we put on Christ. We were buried with Christ through baptism, and we raise again through baptism. We're tied to Jesus and what he did. It washes away our sins. It forgives us because it ties us to what Jesus did.
It's like a symbolic cleansing, and that's pretty much, I mean, throughout most traditional Christianity. I mean, I don't know how like the Mormons do it and everything, but I believe that's the same thing. Still, baptismal is pretty common across a lot of the European, at least, kind of religions that came from that.
Yeah. So this is the reason why I think that Christianity, why I think is true, but also why I treat the Gospels differently than I treat some of the Old Testament, for example. Anyway, that was a long-winded explanation for that response to your point earlier. I'm sorry for going on, but yeah, that's a rough idea.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, and then give me your take, just a brief take, because we have the paper and you already wrote all that. But yeah, what are your thoughts kind of right now on the whole space traveling age? And which, by the way, I was reading, it's crazy numbers to even think about, but as of the end of this month, or yesterday when I last looked, Elon Musk is worth $193 billion.
Yeah, I think I saw that too.
Literally like $90 billion more than Jeff Bezos, who is in second. And that just blew my mind. I was like, wow, like that's a big. But a lot of it is due to the government contracts, and then of course Tesla getting a lot of good growth lately. The rental car company picked them up to take electronic vehicles.
So cool. Yeah.
And then of course everybody's huge on their stock. So yeah, what do you think about Elon Musk and his vision of a spacefaring humanity is what he calls it?
Yeah, I'm ready for it, man. I mean, I believe that there are extraterrestrials. I believe that there's, for every star, on average, there's a planet, and there's billions of stars. So, there are billions of planets out there. I'm even open to the idea that there are various universes. And so I feel at least a little bit confident that there probably is life out there, non-human life, or not life that we wouldn't normally consider human, and intelligent life. I think probably there has to be some out there. Yeah. So I think that, like, as a Christian, right, I'm like, I want to get into space exploration. One, because it's just awesome. I mean, who doesn't want to be in space exploration?
We're in space right now, so
right.
Here, so.
Yeah, I mean, who doesn't want to like leave our atmosphere and like go check out stuff, and yeah, say what you want about Donald Trump, and he has obviously a lot of flaws, but the creation of the Space Force, I actually think is really needed and a really good idea.
Yeah, huge. I don't know what's to become of it, but I think it was the first indication of like, hey, the government the world subtly saying like, okay, like we're not ever gonna say yes, extraterrestrial to freak everybody out, but we know it, and like this is our subtle way of honoring, like, okay, it exists. Like here's a whole military department and a scientific department dedicated to that. I thought that was incredible.
Yeah, so I'm quite keen on that idea, especially even if we're not talking about aliens, we're just talking about like asteroids or whatever. Yeah, so I'm as a Christian, I'm like, let's go evangelize. Let's go let's go tell people that they can be forgiven by their sins by, trusting in Christ. Let's go in space. Let's go meet these peoples. And there's actually a book that I need to read. I suck at reading fiction. I'm just like, if there's movies out there or video games, why read fiction? But I need to read this book. I bought it to read it. But basically, it's about like Jesuits going into space and doing missions, right? They run into aliens that like are really hostile, and like it's like turns into a horror story, and like they just like all slowly start dying, getting killed, and from these aliens, and so I'm like, yeah, let's go out, let's expand God's glory, and let them know about this first century man named Jesus who claimed to be God and to take away the sins of the world. Let's go tell them about this. So I think Christians should be really invested. Like if you think evangelism is a good idea, and in the paper we talk about this scenario where it's like, think about like the new world, right? South America, right? When
Yeah.
Europe finally discovered like, oh, wait a minute, our world's a lot bigger than we think, right?
Yeah.
They were probably like, oh my gosh, right? These like, we thought the whole world knew about Christ, but clearly they don't. We need to spread the gospel here. And so I think that it'll be sort of a similar paradigm shift in our thinking, where it won't be like just missions to different countries, but it'll be like intergalactic missions. I'm sure we're quite far from that now, but I do think that we're living in really unprecedented times where we're seeing the very baby steps of all this coming to fruition.
Absolutely. I'm gonna pull it up real quick here because there was a documentary that I watched that if you get time to watch it, it's called UFOs. It's something about UFO secrets, but
Okay.
it's a very detailed documentary. There's multiple episodes, and they're actual interviews and like witness accounts of different experiences that people have had.
Mm.
And I found it really, really interesting. And one of them, the most interesting to me, was a guy who claimed to, he was a top scientist and he was a top doctor and scientist and like surgeries and dissecting and all of this stuff. And he claims that when he was about to, he wrote a paper, finished his degrees, and had this really like intriguing paper that people from the government came and said, hey, you're gonna like work for us, here's this new job. And he claims they took him to Area 51 and they had him like for years. His job was to work on and operate on and do operations, biopsies on living and dead extraterrestrial species. And he says that every single one that he worked on was completely different looking in a sense, but every single one of them were in the make of man, being, 2 feet, 2 hands, head, eyes, mouth, but they were all different and they couldn't speak like English. But he said they all every single one of them communicated telepathically.
Gotcha.
It was really, really interesting. I want to try to find this on here so I can pull it up, because it's something that you definitely got to watch. Like it just got me thinking, and then I was like, well, started looking into it more, and then of course all this other stuff with
Right. Well,
find it at the time, but I'll send it to you when I get it. But
yeah, do so.
yeah,
Especially with all the UFO military stuff that's like being released in these last couple of years. It's definitely an interesting time.
a lot of that is in there. They talk about several lights over the White House in the 60s that flew over. They talk about something that happened here in Phoenix in 1998. And then, various encounters like that, people with Area 51, Roswell. And then they even go to like Australia and talk about it's not just in America, but they said it all started happening. The first time that we ever saw them was around World War II, and it was because we tested atomic bombs. And one theory is that extraterrestrials came here to like stop humans from using those to like wipe everybody out because they know the danger of it. And it's just really it's next level. It's next level. Like it's just very thought provoking. Whether it's true or not, it gets you thinking about space and voyaging. So
right.
But yeah, we'll go ahead and wrap up here. We're about at 9:22. Been about an hour and 10 minutes right now. But we definitely got to have you back on for a part 2 because we just started opening the can of worms with like space. And obviously my next thing I was going to ask you, which we'll save it for the next time we sit down, was how do you think like religion has evolved with how fast science has evolved, and obviously Christianity now, you're saying you're Catholic now, different things. Yes, there's intelligent creation meant for evolution. So it seems a lot of things are changing, and a lot of people are more open to different views. So I want to dive into that.
Absolutely,
and of course,
man.
a lot more sports too, as well. We got tons.
Yeah,
of
I know. So I've developed also. So when we hung out, I was always like Spurs were my number one team to cheer for. Obviously, if you remember the many times where.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Suns and Spurs and Pacers. We went to games. So.
Yes. And I remember you made Manu Ginobili miss those free throws that made the Spurs lose to the Pacers.
We made contact, and I was slamming the little balloons, and he bricked. He doesn't
but yeah, I've become much more ecumenical, especially moving to back to Houston, where it's just kind of like any Texas team I cheer for. So it's like any Texas team I claim. So Mavericks, Spurs, Rockets, I claim them all. And whenever they go against non-Texas teams, it's always like I have preferences still. But yeah, right now, given that the Rockets and Spurs suck really bad, I'm primarily paying attention to the Mavericks and Luka. Luka's my boy.
He's to me. I mean, he's probably. I mean, I don't know. Giannis is probably still the best player, but he's like right there. He's so good.
He is.
I mean, how can you not like the Mavericks? Very likable player.
And Porzingis right now is like, I don't know if you've noticed, but like the last like 7-8 games, he's been averaging like 24, 25 points a game, and Jason Kidd's really done him justice.
That's what they need, because literally those two. So before this even happened, I always said Porzingis needs to hook up with Luka, and then they need to get Giannis over there, and they'll win. Like that would be the complete big three. And it's so cool because they're all foreign from different countries.
Right.
So it would just be like the coolest big three ever. But when that happened, obviously he was coming off this serious injury and had to play his way back into shape. But no, they're two of my favorite players in the league right now, even ahead of Jason Tatum. Like the Celtics are still my favorite team, but I go back and forth because Tatum's really talented, but I'm frustrated with the way he plays, and he's just not the best team player. So.
Yeah, did you see the Maverick game versus the Celtics the last time they played, where Luka had that game winner step back? I'm just like, geez, that was a great game. That was a great game.
Yeah, he's just a fantastic player to watch. I think he'll win a championship, maybe 2, and probably an MVP or 2 before he's done.
I think so. Yeah, but for the winners of this year, I predicted before the season started that the Lakers would suck. So I'm quite happy still with this prediction.
That's exactly what Mason said.
Oh, really?
I think the Suns are surprising everybody, because I was like, it was a fluke that they made the finals last year. Everybody they played was hurt. It was still a COVID season. There was 2 years in one. Like,
right.
We really count on it, and they're still almost. It looks like just as good as last year. So
yeah. They're doing really well.
Actually, I believe they just won their 15th or 16th game straight tonight. They beat the Knicks. So
yeah, no, I think that they're definitely a good chance to be in the finals. But I'm picking Brooklyn to be in the finals, and I have to think that a healthy Harden, which he is starting to play better now that the season has gone open a little bit more. And Durant, that combo, man, I have to think that's going to win. And I am partial to Harden, being a Rockets fan and wanting to see him win a ship. So I do have my biases, right? But I'm thinking right now it might be Nets versus Suns in the finals, or Nets versus Warriors in the finals. That's kind of what I'm thinking. So we'll see about that. And then I think the Mavericks this year will get to the second round finally. I do think that it's possible that they even get to the third round. They're playing, they had like 3 games without Luka, where they played the Clippers, Suns, and they lost all 3. But Luka came back. They beat the Clippers. Generally, I think they're probably going to be in the 3rd seed spot. So those are kind of my NBA predictions, as we normally would predict, at the beginning of every year. And every year I picked the Spurs, if you remember.
Oh yeah.
Which back then it wasn't a bad guess. It was like a 50-50 shot.
I know the fact that they made, let's see, from 99 to 14, they played in like 7 championships and won 5.
Yes, they won 6. They played in 6 and won 5. Yeah.
Okay.
They almost beat the Heat.
Was against Miami. Yeah.
Yep. And they got revenge the next year. They got revenge against the Heat the next year.
That I can tell you, that was the first year I rooted for the Spurs in the finals. Years that they played Miami, and then after that, I never really I got over it. I was like, oh, like the Spurs are fine to me. Like my least favorite teams are the Lakers and probably the Nets right now, just because of makeup. But I did say so. Depending on what happens second half of the season, if Jamal Murray plays into shape or even plays this year, I had originally picked Denver and Brooklyn. Denver and Brooklyn, I thought, because I didn't think the Bucks would get back. I didn't think they would maintain that level of greatness that they were at. And I thought the Suns were a fluke. So I was like, well, they're good, but they got there a little bit earlier ahead of schedule. Like they're still rebuilding. But that's not really the case, it looks like. If the Nuggets are healthy, I think they're one of the best teams with Jokic, Gordon, and Murray.
Oh, yeah.
So I think they could play the Nets to a 6 or 7 game series. But I think ultimately Nets are just too much offense.
And who knows? Maybe Irving will get a shot before it's all said and done, and he'll be able to play too. But we can definitely unite in our hatred for the Lakers organization. So
it's been good to see them kind of go down, I guess. But it's still what LeBron's
as a Rockets fan, having Westbrook totally wreck the team and totally destroy what they had going, and then I think it led eventually to Harden being traded as well. I was just like, nope, Westbrook, he can't shoot jumpers consistently, but he thinks he can, and he
still shoots them. He's the one person that he's not a good 3-point shooter, but he's still gonna just take pull-up transition threes for no reason.
Yep. So I was like, it's not gonna work out so great as everyone thinks it's going to.
The Rockets they brought John Wall over, which I think he's like there, but not really on the team right now.
Right.
And then there was the Dwight Howard phase. The Rockets went through a lot of trying to put guys there.
Right. They were a hamstring away, though. They were a hamstring away. That Clint Capella, Chris Paul, Harden, Gordon. That was just Eric Gordon. That was a really fun team to watch and to cheer for. It's sad that it died. Rest in peace.
Yeah, that's kind of what's happened to the Celtics too. I mean, it's just like some talent is there, but the chemistry it's off. And the coach, I'm a big fan of the coach. He was a player. I'm sure you remember him, like briefly as a player.
Yeah. He played for the Spurs.
And he's a great guy, but I just, for whatever reason, it's not working out right now.
Yeah,
he doesn't seem to have the locker room, and it's wishy-washy.
Same thing with Silas. I'm just like, seems like a really great guy, a guy that I'd have the privilege of meeting one day. But for the Rockets team right now, I just don't think he's probably the right guy.
Right.
Yeah. And I mean, the Rockets right now, as it sits today, have just as many wins as the Texans.
Oh,
and
wow.
It's like almost December. So
that tells you that they're on pace for like the worst record,
the worst ever
history, and possibly the worst record ever.
Yeah, they're on record for the worst record in the NBA history. Yeah.
And is it the Bobcats or the Celtics that own that? It's because the Celtics had a 19-win season, but I think the Bobcats had like a 16 or 17-win season.
Yeah, it might have even been like 12 or something. But yeah, I think it's the Bobcats own that record. Yeah.
Well, I'm kind of glad. It's funny because they're just a little blip in history, you know. And what people don't, we'll have to go back and explain to our kids that like the Charlotte Hornets are not the actual Charlotte Hornets, Charlotte Pelicans, and they just it all came back around full circle. Kind of like the
Exactly.
Rams, like there's something like that with like the Rams and the Raiders or one of those teams like the
I didn't
other
know that.
or the Charger because they all moved around and they were like San Diego, Las Vegas, Los Angeles, and then yeah, so interesting stuff.
Yes.
The
Yes.
Browns,
Very good.
Browns, Ravens, that whole thing, like the Ravens are the actual Browns, and the Browns are like an
Okay.
expansion franchise because the Browns were the Browns till '96, and then they became the Ravens.
Oh, I didn't know that either. Okay.
And then '99, the Browns came back as an expansion franchise.
Ah,
Yeah,
very
so there's a
interesting.
lot of like weird stuff like that, like, and that's what happened to the Hornets. So.
Yeah.
And we got
Right.
Pelicans, good old Pelicans down there, which is probably the coolest name for a team. So yeah, but no, I'll
Yeah,
let you get to your day here. And what time is it over there now? 1:30?
12:30.
12:30? Okay,
Yeah.
not bad. Yeah, it's
No, not
Friday
at
night
all.
over here, 9:30, day after Thanksgiving. So I actually had to work today. I was in the office today, so
Ah,
uh, yeah, did all that, and then get to enjoy the weekend off. Probably go hang with my dad and grandparents. They're in town from Florida.
tell
So
your dad I said what up. So, and if
yeah,
you see
I will
Mason
absolutely.
or if you talk to Mason,
Yeah.
tell him that hold on. Tell him, hey there, Delilah, for me.
Yep. Too funny. Yeah, no, he'll me and him do like the sports podcasts on our other one through like the Fun Times account. We'll do sports
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
And I'm actually right now I'm in the process of trying to get both. There's this new company and it's an app called Colorcast, and it's
Okay.
basically a startup company based out of Austin, Texas, but they license sports games and they
Mm.
independently have people come on and commentate and like broadcast. So they hire people as
Oh,
like freelance commentators. So I'm trying to get me and him on as like a commentary tandem to do
that's
NBA games
dope.
for that color cast.
That's
So
really cool. That's dope.
yeah,
Yeah.
so we'll see how that goes. Just all a part of scaling this and doing this more. I got my whole setup built out. It's like my little studio room in the apartment
Love it.
here. So got
Yeah.
a mini fridge back there, over there, all the sodas and water and beers, Gatorades, the cucumber lime Gatorade. Do you like that? Have you had it?
I haven't. No, they don't have it in China. So
Okay.
or Korea. I haven't I think I heard about that coming up, but I don't think I've tried that when I was in America.
It's one of my favorite. It's so refreshing. It's the truest like thirst quenching Gatorade that there is. It's unbelievable.
I'll have to try it. I'll have to
Yeah.
try it out.
But I can say too, I was just thinking about it. I was like, I haven't really like legitimately played basketball since probably like when I was out there for your wedding, and maybe not even that time. I think it was the time we went to Houston. Like I'll
Oh
play basketball.
wow.
Like
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
me and Mason every once in a while at the old apartments we would live at, we'd go play there. But
Yeah.
not like I just started this new gym over here and they have a full court basketball thing inside. So I'm about to
Yeah.
tomorrow I'm actually gonna go buy a basketball in the morning, get up,
Awesome.
go to the gym and yeah, relive some old
Well,
time.
wait, when I'm back in the States, we need to make sure we get together, if I'm in
Oh, for
Phoenix or if
sure.
you're wherever you are, we'll try to get together and we'll play again.
Yep. Yeah, no, I'm in Phoenix now, so we'll fly. Flights are cheap. I mean, with gas and everything, that makes no sense to drive. So we'll
Yeah.
just fly. We'll fly out there and come see you guys and whatever. And are you?
Yeah. Yeah.
What's your plan? When you're done, how many years do you got left over there? Or are you just thinking of like
Well,
just trying for as long as you
it's,
can?
it's yeah, so I'm in a permanent position, but I still plan to go back once COVID dies down, which who knows when that will be. Um, uh, I plan to go back to the States and just like see my parents and stuff like that, or go to conferences in the States and stuff. So
Yeah.
I plan to still be in the States, off somewhat frequently. But the trick right now is that you can't get to Macau from the States directly if you're not a citizen. And so you have to do all these crazy weeks of quarantining and so forth. So, which is understandable. It's understandable. I mean, they just caught, that new variant that just came out, that they just discovered like 2 days ago.
I'm like, I just saw the name of it. I forget what it was. I was looking
Like
it up.
Omicron or something like that.
Yeah, sounds like the Allspark or something from Transformers.
Yes, it really does. So apparently it's like de facto immune to, or it's the vaccines are basically de facto useless against it and stuff. And so they actually caught a case in Hong Kong, but because of the mandatory quarantining, they didn't, go out in public and spread it everywhere. Right? It could have been a complete disaster. So I definitely totally understand all the quarantining and stuff, but it just makes travel back and forth to America like impossible right now. And so, but yes, when something happens in the future and I'm able to go back and forth to America, definitely let's hang out. And obviously, if you ever want to come to China, go to Hong Kong, Macau, the mainland, see the Great Wall or something, hit me up. You can stay with us, and I can take you for an adventure. So
that would be awesome. I do need to travel again. I'm actually in the process of getting my passport renewed right now, so I can get back out. And because I literally haven't left the country since 2006. I went to Mexico, and I'm like, Mexico's like my backyard. So that's really not even, I don't consider that international. Really, 2003, I was in India, Singapore, and Korea. So that was literally the last time I left the country. So I'm excited to get out and go. I'll have more.
Yes.
My time starts over in January, my vacation time and all that. So.
Well, you have a place in Macau.
Hey, I'm looking forward to it. So yeah, I'll get you back on here. I know you're on PS5 now. I have the Xbox, but a lot of these games, well, not a lot, but Halo, the new Halo came out. You're not able to play that, but like Warzone or whatever, Call of Duty, that's the one
Call of Duty.
Play,
yeah.
So forever,
that's not
forever around and got a day, which the time difference is crazy, but forever just doing nothing. It's like a morning where you're up and it's this time for me. Just send me a Facebook message and we'll jump in there.
Sounds good, man. Sounds good.
Yeah, no, tell the family I said hey, and I literally haven't met any of your kids. Like, it's crazy. You got 5 now. I still have 0. So.
Man, they add so much meaning to life. It's so crazy. Like what they do for just like your own reasons for existence. It's just like it's so incredible. And so yeah, we have 5 that I need to introduce you to them. Whenever we see each other, if possible. But yeah, we can call you Uncle Carrington. So.
Yep, sounds good. Yeah, no, I'll catch you next time. Like I said, while you're out there, we'll do this again. Schedule another time, go over a lot of different stuff. But it's fun. Yeah, it's fun to catch up. Like I said, just like sitting down in the room here. I got like a table and chairs, couch, all that stuff. It's like a full little studio lounge room. But yeah, do the stream for now, and it's worked. Best time for technology.
Indeed, indeed.
Well, hey, have a great.
All right, man.
You
have a wonderful day. Yeah, have a good night. Watch something good on Netflix or something, and do whatever is going to entertain you. So enjoy it.
Yep.
All right, man.
Awesome.
God bless.
Thank you, man. Have a good one.